Millionaire abandons his pregnant girlfriend just because she's black, but years later his son's identity leave him stunned. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. 20 years ago, Daniel Whitmore made a choice that would haunt him forever. Standing in his penthouse office overlooking the city, he held a picture of Maya Taylor in his hands. She was the love of his life, and she was carrying his child. But his family had made things very clear. It was either the company or Maya. There was no room for both. The investors won't stand for it, his father had told him. A pregnant girlfriend from the wrong side of the tracks? The board would pull their support in a heartbeat. Daniel looked at his reflection in the window. At 32, he was about to become the youngest CEO of a major tech company in the country. Whitmore Innovations was his baby, his dream. The algorithms he'd created were revolutionary. They would change the world. He picked up the phone and dialed Maya's number. His hands were shaking. "Maya," he said, his voice breaking, "we need to talk." That was the last time he spoke to her. He told himself it was for the best. Love was expendable, legacy wasn't. The years passed and Daniel's empire grew. Whitmore Innovations became a tech giant, and his AI systems were used by companies around the world. He married Caroline, a woman his family approved of. They had no children, and their marriage was more of a business arrangement than a love story. They lived separate lives in the same mansion, but sometimes, late at night, Daniel would think about Maya. He wondered about the child she was carrying. Boy or girl? Did they have his eyes? His love for numbers? He never looked for answers. He was too afraid of what he might find. One morning, his assistant burst into his office. "Mr. Whitmore, you need to see this." She handed him a newspaper. The headline made his blood run cold. Civil rights attorney Maya Taylor takes on tech giant Aegis Systems. Daniel knew Aegis Systems well, too well. They had bought his early AI algorithms, the ones that helped companies make hiring decisions. He scanned the article, and his heart stopped when he read the next line. Leading the technical investigation is data scientist Malik Taylor, who has uncovered systematic racial bias in the company's hiring algorithms. Malik Taylor, 25 years old, a rising star in the field of AI ethics. Daniel's son. The world he had built so carefully was about to come crashing down. The algorithms he had created, the ones he had sold to Aegis, were being exposed as tools of discrimination, and the person exposing them was his own flesh and blood. His phone rang. It was his lawyer. "Daniel, we've been served. Maya Taylor wants to depose you about the original algorithms." Daniel sat down heavily in his leather chair. After 20 years, he would have to face Maya again and meet the son he had never known. "Set it up," he said quietly. "It's time." The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. His family was in an uproar. The board members were calling emergency meetings. Everyone wanted him to fight, to deny, to protect the company at all costs. But for the first time in 20 years, Daniel wasn't thinking about the company. He was thinking about Maya, about Malik, about the harm his algorithms might have caused to countless people. The day of the deposition arrived. Daniel arrived early at the law offices. He was sitting alone in the conference room when the door opened. Maya walked in. 20 years had only made her more beautiful, more powerful. Her eyes met his, and they were full of fire. "Hello, Daniel," she said coldly. "Let's talk about your algorithms." Behind her stood a young man with Daniel's height and Maya's determined expression. Malik, his son. The deposition was about to begin, and with it, the unraveling of everything Daniel had built his life upon. But looking at his son, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maya Taylor sat in her small apartment, holding her newborn son. Tears fell on Malik's tiny face as she watched him sleep. It had been 3 months since Daniel walked away, choosing his family's empire over their love. "It's just you and me now, baby," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "But we're going to be okay. Mama's going to make sure of that." The next morning, Maya walked into the financial aid office at the law school. Her baby bump was still visible, but she stood tall. "I need to know my options," she told the counselor. "I'm having this baby, and I'm finishing law school. Both of these things are happening." The counselor looked at her with sympathy. "It won't be easy, Ms. Taylor. Nothing worth doing ever is." Maya worked 3 jobs while finishing law school. During the day, she answered phones at a law firm. At night, she waited tables. On weekends, she did data entry. Her mother helped with Malik when she could, but mostly it was just Maya, running on coffee and determination. Malik was a quiet baby, always watching everything with serious eyes. Daniel's eyes. Sometimes it hurt to look at him, but Maya pushed through the pain. She wouldn't let Daniel's ghost haunt their future. One night, while studying for finals, Maya came across an article about bias in computer systems. It talked about how AI programs were making decisions that hurt minority communities. She thought about Daniel and his precious algorithms. "Is this what you're doing now?" she whispered to his memory. "Building machines that judge people like me." That article changed everything. Maya found her calling. She would become a civil rights attorney, focusing on technology discrimination. She would fight for people who were being shut out by computer programs that claimed to be fair but weren't. Years passed. Maya built her reputation, one case at a time. She took on companies that used AI to deny people loans, jobs, and opportunities. She won more cases than she lost, and people started to notice. Malik grew into a brilliant boy. By age 10, he was already programming computers. Maya watched him work, his fingers flying over the keyboard, and saw Daniel in every line of code. "Mom," Malik said one day, "these programs they use for hiring people, they're not fair. I can see the patterns." Maya's heart swelled with pride and worry. Her son had inherited his father's gift for numbers, but he was using it to fight for justice. As Malik got older, his talent for exposing bias in AI systems grew stronger. He started winning science fairs, then scholarships. By the time he was in college, he was already publishing papers about discriminatory algorithms. Maya kept tabs on Daniel through the news. She saw him at charity events with his wife, Caroline. They looked perfect together, like two marble statues, cold and beautiful. Sometimes she wondered if he ever thought about their son. Then came the Aegis Systems case. Maya had been building towards this moment for years. Aegis was using AI to screen job applicants, and the numbers didn't lie. They were systematically excluding minorities. "Mom," Malik said one evening, his eyes glowing with excitement, "I found something in their code. The base algorithms, they're old, really old. And guess who wrote them?" Maya's heart stopped. Daniel Whitmore. Whitmore Innovations sold them to Aegis 15 years ago. "Mom, these algorithms are biased at their core, and I can prove it." Maya looked at her son, now a grown man. He had no idea he was about to take down his own father's work. The irony would have made her laugh if it didn't hurt so much. The lawsuit made headlines. Corporate America was watching. Maya knew this would be the biggest case of her career, but she wasn't prepared for seeing Daniel again. When he walked into the deposition room, she felt like that young law student again, heartbroken and angry. But this time, she had power. This time, she had truth on her side. "Hello, Daniel," she said, her voice steady. "Let's talk about your algorithms." She watched his face as he saw Malik, the shock, the recognition. For a moment, Maya felt a flash of satisfaction. Let him see what he gave up. Let him see the brilliant man his son had become without him. The deposition began. Maya's questions were sharp, precise. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't known it. "Did you know your algorithms had inherent racial bias, Mr. Whitmore? Did you test them against diverse populations? Were you aware that your code could destroy people's lives?" With each question, she saw Daniel's carefully constructed world crumbling. Part of her wanted to stop, to show mercy, but she remembered all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, all the times she had to explain to Malik why he didn't have a father. Justice wasn't always kind. Sometimes it had to hurt before it could heal. As the deposition ended, Maya gathered her papers. She could feel Daniel's eyes on her, pleading for a private moment. She ignored him. "Mom," Malik said as they left, "are you okay?" Maya looked at her son, brilliant, compassionate, strong, everything she had ever wanted him to be. "Yes, baby," she said softly. "For the first time in 20 years, I really am." Malik Taylor never needed a father. That's what he always told himself. He had his mother, and she was enough, more than enough. He saw how hard she worked, how she fought for every opportunity. She was his hero. Growing up, other kids would ask about his dad. Malik would shrug it off. "It's just me and my mom," he'd say. But late at night, he'd sometimes look in the mirror and wonder about the parts of himself that didn't come from Maya. His height, his way with numbers, the shape of his eyes. Computers made sense to Malik in a way people didn't. By the time he was 12, he could take apart and rebuild any machine his mother brought home from the thrift store. The code spoke to him, like a language he'd known since birth. "You're a natural," his high school computer science teacher told him. "I've never seen anyone understand algorithms like you do." Malik didn't know then that he'd inherited this gift from Daniel Whitmore. He didn't know that the man whose work he studied in his college textbooks was his father. All he knew was that something wasn't right with the way these systems worked. "Look at this, Mom," he said one day, showing her his laptop screen. "These hiring algorithms, they're rejecting qualified candidates just because of their zip codes. And guess which neighborhoods those are?" Maya looked at his work with pride and worry. "Be careful, baby. These companies have a lot of power." But Malik couldn't stop. He dug deeper, studied harder. He earned his PhD in computer science, focusing on AI ethics. His research started making waves in the tech world. People were finally paying attention to the bias built into these systems. Then came the day he cracked open Aegis Systems code. He stayed up all night tracing the patterns, following the logic. When he found the original signature buried in the base algorithms, his world stopped. "Daniel Whitmore," he whispered, staring at the name. Malik had studied Whitmore's work. Everyone in tech knew about him. The brilliant innovator who built an empire on AI. The man who claimed his systems were perfect. The man who was his father. Malik ran to the bathroom and threw up. When he looked in the mirror, he finally understood why his reflection had always felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. He had Daniel Whitmore's eyes, his height, his gift for algorithms. He called his mother. "Mom!" His voice shook. "Why didn't you tell me?" The silence on the other end of the line felt endless. "Because you didn't need him," Maya finally said. "You needed to become your own person." Malik spent the next week in a daze. He read everything he could find about Daniel Whitmore. The magazines called him a genius, a visionary. They showed pictures of him with his wife, Caroline, at charity events. He had no other children. "He threw us away," Malik told his computer screen. "And he built systems that throw away people like us every day." The anger fueled his work. He documented every flaw, every bias in the Aegis system. When his mother filed the lawsuit, Malik knew this was more than just another case. This was personal. The day of the deposition, Malik put on his best suit, the one his mother had bought him when he graduated. He stood tall, channeling Maya's strength. When Daniel walked in, Malik felt like he'd been punched in the gut. It was like looking at an older version of himself. The same walk, the same way of holding his shoulders. Daniel's face went white when he saw Malik. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by something that looked like pain. "Mr. Whitmore," Malik said coldly, "let's talk about your code." For hours, Malik laid out his findings. He showed how the algorithms discriminated, how they hurt people, how they destroyed dreams. He spoke with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a preacher. Your system isn't just flawed," he told Daniel. "It's deliberately blind to its own bias, and you knew. You had to know." Daniel tried to catch his eye several times, tried to communicate something without words. Malik ignored him. He didn't need a father's pride or guilt now. He needed justice. After the deposition, Daniel caught up to him in the hallway. "Malik, please, can we talk?" "About what, Mr. Whitmore? About how you abandoned my mother? Or about how your precious algorithms have been ruining lives for 20 years? "I made mistakes," Daniel said softly. "Terrible mistakes." Malik looked at the man who gave him his love for numbers and his talent for code. The man who had everything but chose to have nothing to do with him. Mistakes. Malik laughed bitterly. "No, Mr. Whitmore. A mistake is a bug in the code. What you did was a choice. And now you're going to face the consequences of that choice." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "You know what's ironic? You gave up your real family to build systems that destroy families like ours. But I'm going to use the gifts I got from you to tear those systems down." Malik left Daniel standing in the hallway, looking lost. He felt lighter somehow, stronger. He didn't need Daniel Whitmore's approval or love. He had his mother's strength, his own purpose, and the truth on his side. That night, he worked late in his office, rewriting the algorithms that would replace the biased systems. His code would be different. It would be fair. It would see people for who they really were, not who someone like Daniel Whitmore thought they should be. The news hit the corporate world like a bomb. "Whitmore ear exposes father's biased AI," screamed the headlines. Daniel Whitmore's perfect world started crumbling faster than anyone expected. Richard Whitmore, Daniel's father, slammed the newspaper down on his mahogany desk. At 75, he still ruled the family with an iron fist. "What were you thinking?" he shouted at Daniel. "Meeting with them? Letting that woman depose you? Do you have any idea what this will do to our stock prices?" Caroline, Daniel's wife, stood by the window of their mansion, drinking her third martini of the morning. "I knew this would come back to haunt us," she said bitterly. "That woman and her son, your son, Daniel sat there taking their anger. For the first time in 20 years, their words couldn't touch him. All he could think about was Malik's face, so much like his own, full of hurt and determination. Meanwhile, at Aegis Systems, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. James Morrison, the CEO, was furious. "Fix this," he ordered his team of lawyers. "I don't care how. Destroy their credibility, both of them, the mother and the son." The lawyers went to work. They dug into Maya's past, looking for anything they could use against her. They hired private investigators to follow Malik, hoping to catch him doing something wrong. "We found something," one of the investigators told Morrison. "The kid's been accessing our systems. We can spin this as corporate espionage." Morrison smiled. "Perfect. Get the papers ready. We're going to sue him for everything he's got." The news hit Maya's office on a Tuesday morning. Her secretary handed her the lawsuit with shaking hands. "They're saying Malik hacked their systems illegally," Maya said, reading the documents. "They're asking for 50 million in damages." Malik paced in her office. "But I had permission. Their own IT department gave me access for the audit." "They're saying that permission didn't cover the core algorithms," Maya explained. "They're claiming you went beyond the scope of the authorization." The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted statements. Other clients started getting nervous. Some even started pulling their cases. "Maybe we should back off," Maya's law partner suggested. "We can't fight Aegis and Whitmore Innovations at the same time. They'll crush us." Maya stood up, her eyes flashing. "No, they want to play dirty. Fine, but they picked the wrong family to mess with." At the Whitmore mansion, Daniel watched the news coverage with growing horror. He saw how they were painting his son as a criminal, his mother as an opportunist. "You have to stop this," he told his father. Richard Whitmore laughed. "Stop it? Boy, I ordered it. That woman and her bastard son need to learn their place." Something snapped inside Daniel. 20 years of being the obedient son, of letting his family control his life, came crashing down. "That bastard son is my child," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "And he's twice the man I am. He's using his gifts to help people, while I've been using mine to hurt them." Caroline stepped between them. "Daniel, think about what you're doing. If you side with them, you'll lose everything. The company, your position, your inheritance." Daniel looked at his wife of 15 years. She was beautiful, polished, perfect, and completely empty inside, just like their marriage. "I've already lost everything that matters," he said quietly. "I lost it 20 years ago when I let you all convince me to abandon Maya and my child." He walked to his father's desk and pulled out a piece of paper, his resignation letter. He'd written it the night after the deposition. "I'm done," he said. "I'm going to tell the truth about everything. The algorithms, the bias, how we knew about it and covered it up. All of it." Richard Whitmore's face turned purple. "If you do this, you're no longer my son." Daniel smiled sadly. "I stopped being your son the day I chose your empire over my own child." He walked out of the mansion, leaving his father shouting threats behind him. His phone started ringing immediately. It was James Morrison from Aegis. "Have you lost your mind?" Morrison yelled. "You can't testify against us. We'll bury you." "No," Daniel said calmly. "You won't. Because if you try, I'll release every email, every memo, every piece of evidence showing how we built discrimination into these systems from the start. How's that for corporate espionage?" He hung up and drove straight to Maya's office. Her secretary tried to stop him, but he walked right past. Maya looked up from her desk, surprised. "Daniel, I want to help," he said simply. "I want to make this right, not just for Malik, but for everyone our systems have hurt." Maya studied him for a long moment. "Why now?" "Because 20 years ago I was a coward. I chose money and power over love and justice. I won't make that mistake again." Maya picked up her phone. "Malik needs to be here for this conversation." An hour later, Malik arrived. He looked at his father warily. "I hear you want to help," he said. Daniel nodded. "I do, but only if you both want me to. I know I don't deserve a second chance." Malik looked at his mother, then back at Daniel. "This isn't about second chances," he said firmly. "This is about doing what's right. Can you handle that?" Daniel felt tears in his eyes. Yes, I can." Outside the office, the press was gathering. The story was about to get bigger than anyone expected. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, the truth had a fighting chance. The morning talk shows couldn't get enough of the story. Tech billionaire joins forces with estranged son to expose industry bias was everywhere. Pictures of Daniel, Maya, and Malik were splashed across every screen in America. Maya's phone rang at 6 a.m. It was her mother. "Baby, are you sure about this?" her mother asked. These people destroyed you once before. They'll do it again. Maya looked at the stack of evidence on her desk, emails, memos, test results showing how the AI systems were rigged from the start. It's different this time, Mama, she said. This time we have proof, and we have Daniel. At his temporary apartment across town, Daniel was packing up the last of his things from the mansion. Caroline had changed the locks, but he didn't care. 20 years of expensive suits and rare watches. None of it mattered anymore. His cell phone buzzed. A text from his father. Last chance to come to your senses. Daniel deleted it without responding. He had a meeting with the SEC in an hour. He was going to tell them everything. Malik was already at the federal building when Daniel arrived. The young man looked tired but determined. Ready? Malik asked, not quite meeting his father's eyes. Ready, Daniel nodded. Malik, I know this isn't easy for you. Working with me. This isn't about you and me, Malik said firmly. This is about justice. Inside the conference room, Daniel laid it all out. How the original algorithms were designed to favor certain backgrounds. How they knew about the bias but buried the test results. How Aegis had made the problem even worse. We marketed these systems as objective, Daniel testified, but we built our own prejudices right into the code. Millions of people lost opportunities because of what we did. The SEC investigators took notes furiously. One of them looked up at Daniel. Mr. Whitmore, you realize this testimony could result in criminal charges. I do, Daniel said quietly. And I'll accept whatever consequences come. Meanwhile, Maya was in court, fighting Aegis's lawsuit against Malik. The corporate lawyers were aggressive, trying to paint Malik as a hacker and a thief. Your Honor, Maya argued, her voice strong and clear. My client had explicit permission to audit these systems. Aegis is only crying foul because they don't like what he found. The judge looked at the evidence. Ms. Taylor, are you prepared to prove these allegations of systematic bias? Maya smiled. More than prepared, Your Honor, and we have a star witness. The next day, every major news network carried Daniel's testimony live. He held nothing back. He talked about the pressure from his family, about abandoning Maya and their unborn child, about years of covering up the truth. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he told the cameras. I'm here to set things right. In his luxury office, Richard Whitmore watched his son's testimony with cold fury. He picked up his phone. Get me James Morrison at Aegis, he barked. Tell him it's time to release everything we have on the Taylor boy. But Morrison had his own problems. The SEC was going through Aegis's servers with a fine-tooth comb. Employees were coming forward with their own stories of cover-ups and corruption. The pressure was building. Aegis's stock was in free fall. Whitmore Innovations wasn't far behind. Late that night, Maya found Daniel sitting alone in her office. The board is meeting tomorrow, he said without looking up. They're going to remove me as CEO. Are you okay? Maya asked softly. Daniel finally looked at her. You know what's strange? I feel more okay than I have in 20 years. Maya sat down across from him. Daniel, why did you really decide to help us? Because when I saw Malik in that deposition room, I saw everything I could have been, everything I threw away. He's a better person than I ever was, Maya. You did that. You raised him to be strong and brave and true. He gets some of that from you too, Maya said quietly. That brilliant mind of his. That's all Whitmore. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both thinking about the past, about what might have been. Malik found them there an hour later. He'd been working late, rewriting his father's algorithms to be truly fair. Mom, the SEC wants to talk to us again tomorrow. They found something big in the Aegis files. He hesitated, then turned to Daniel. You should come too. We could use your expertise. Daniel felt his heart skip a beat. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The next morning, as they walked into the federal building together, reporters shouted questions. Mr. Whitmore, did you choose your company over your family? Ms. Taylor, do you forgive him? Malik, what's it like working with the father who abandoned you? Maya stepped forward, her head high. We're not here to talk about the past. We're here to change the future, and we're going to do it together. For the first time, they looked like a family. Not a perfect one, not a traditional one, but a family united by purpose and truth. Behind them on the news ticker, another headline scrolled, Aegis CEO James Morrison resigns amid growing scandal. The truth was winning, but the biggest battles, both public and private, were still to come. Caroline Whitmore's divorce papers arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Daniel signed them without hesitation. The prenup meant she'd get half of everything, but he didn't care. Money had stopped mattering to him the moment he chose truth over power. "So you're making a fool of yourself," Caroline told him over the phone. "Running around with your illegitimate son and that woman. The whole city is laughing at you." "Let them laugh," Daniel replied. "For the first time in my life, I'm doing something worth doing." The SEC investigation was getting bigger every day. More companies were being pulled in, more biased systems exposed. Malik's research had opened a floodgate of revelations about discrimination in the tech industry. Maya was working around the clock, taking calls from other lawyers who wanted to file similar cases. Her small office had become command central for a nationwide legal battle. "Mum, you need to rest," Malik told her, bringing her coffee late one night. "I'll rest when we win," she said. But she smiled at her son's concern. Daniel knocked on the office door carrying takeout bags. "I thought everyone could use some dinner." It had become a routine, late-night strategy sessions, sharing meals, working together to build a better system. Slowly, awkwardly, they were becoming something like a family, but not everyone was happy about it. Richard Whitmore had one last card to play. "Daniel," he said during an unexpected visit to his son's apartment, "I'm dying." Daniel looked up sharply. "What?" "Cancer. 6 months, maybe less." Richard sat heavily on Daniel's couch. "I always thought you'd take over everything when I was gone. Continue the Whitmore legacy." "Dad, just listen. I'll make you a deal. Come back to the company. Drop this crusade. I'll make sure you have controlling interest after I'm gone. You can change things from the inside slowly, properly, not this spectacle you're creating." Daniel studied his father's face, the great Richard Whitmore, trying one last manipulation. "Is it true?" Daniel asked quietly. "About the cancer." Richard's eyes slid away. Daniel had his answer. "Goodbye, Dad," he said, opening the door. "Don't try this again." At that moment, his phone buzzed. A text from Malik. "Need your help with some code, if you're free." Daniel felt his heart lift. These small moments with his son meant more than any corporate empire. He found Malik in the conference room, surrounded by computers. Maya was there too, reading documents. "Look at this," Malik said, showing him lines of code. "I think I found a way to test AI systems for bias before they're implemented, but I need your insight on the original algorithms." Daniel sat down beside his son, their heads bent together over the laptop. They looked so alike it made Maya's heart ache. "The weighted variables here," Daniel pointed. "That's where we hid the bias originally. If you adjust the parameters." They worked late into the night. Maya watched them, seeing 20 years of lost time being slowly, painfully reclaimed. The next morning brought new challenges. James Morrison, the former Aegis CEO, had turned state's evidence. He was naming names, sharing documents, revealing just how deep the corruption went. "They're going to arrest some board members," Daniel told Maya and Malik, "including my father." Maya touched his arm gently. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," he admitted. "He's still my father, even after everything." Malik looked uncomfortable, then spoke. "When I was little, I used to make up stories about you, about why you weren't there. Sometimes I imagined you were a secret agent or an astronaut on a mission." Daniel felt tears forming. "Malik, let me finish," Malik said. "The reality was worse than any story. You chose money over us. But now you're choosing to do what's right. That matters. It doesn't fix the past, but it matters." They were interrupted by Maya's secretary. "Turn on the news, quick!" On every channel, FBI agents were leading Richard Whitmore out of his office in handcuffs. The empire was crumbling. Daniel's phone exploded with messages. Board members, family friends, business partners, all demanding explanations, making threats, picking sides. "I should deal with this," he said, standing up. "We'll help," Malik said firmly. "That's what family does." Maya nodded. "We're in this together now." For the first time since he'd walked away 20 years ago, Daniel felt truly rich. Not with money or power, but with something far more precious, the love of his son and the trust of the woman he'd wronged. Outside, reporters were gathering again. The story was reaching its climax. But inside that office, something beautiful was being rebuilt, one moment at a time. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters on the first day of the trial. Maya stood at the center, flanked by Daniel and Malik. They looked like warriors ready for battle. "The world is watching this case," Maya told the cameras. "Today, we prove that artificial intelligence can't be allowed to hide human prejudice behind computer code." Inside, the courtroom was tense. Aegis Systems had hired the most expensive lawyers in the country. They sat on one side, surrounded by boxes of documents and teams of assistants. Maya's team looked small in comparison, But they had something more powerful than money. They had the truth. The prosecution's opening statement was dramatic. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Maya began, her voice strong and clear, "this case is about more than computer code. It's about dreams denied, careers destroyed, and lives changed forever because someone decided certain people didn't deserve a fair chance." Hour after hour, Maya called witnesses, people who had been rejected by Aegis's AI system despite perfect qualifications, tech experts who explained how the algorithms were biased, former employees who admitted they knew about the problems but were afraid to speak up. Then came Daniel's testimony. The whole courtroom fell silent as he took the stand. "I wrote the original algorithms," he said, looking directly at the jury. "I knew they weren't fair. I knew they would hurt people, but I cared more about profit than people." "And why are you testifying now?" Maya asked. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Because 20 years ago, I made a choice that hurt the people I loved most. I chose money over family. I can't undo that choice, but I can stop these systems from hurting more families." The defense lawyers tried to paint Daniel as bitter and revenge-seeking. "Isn't this really about getting back at your father?" they asked. "No," Daniel replied firmly. "This is about my son, about seeing him fight to fix what I broke, about finally doing what's right." Malik's testimony was even more powerful. He broke down the code step by step, showing exactly how it discriminated. His brilliant mind and passionate commitment to justice shone through every word. "These systems don't just reject people," he explained. "They crush hopes. They tell children they can't dream certain dreams. They reinforce the worst prejudices of our society." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, more evidence came to light. More victims came forward. More tech companies started nervously reviewing their own systems. On the final day, Maya's closing argument brought tears to many eyes. 20 years ago, a brilliant young programmer made a choice between profit and justice. He chose wrong. Today, his son has given us all a chance to choose again, to choose better, to choose justice. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. "We find in favor of the plaintiffs," the foreman announced. The courtroom erupted. The judge had to call for order several times before reading the verdict details. Aegis Systems would pay hundreds of millions in damages. They would have to completely rebuild their hiring systems, and most importantly, new regulations would be put in place to test AI systems for bias before they could be used. Outside the courthouse, celebrations erupted. Maya hugged Malik tight, both of them crying happy tears. Daniel stood slightly apart watching them, until Malik reached out and pulled him into the embrace. Reporters shouted questions. "Miss Taylor, what's next? Mr. Whitmore, will you return to the tech industry? Malik, are you going to work with your father?" Maya stepped forward. "Today, justice won. But our work isn't done. There are more companies, more systems, more battles to fight, and we're going to fight them together." Later that night, they gathered in Maya's office, the place where it had all started. Empty takeout containers littered the conference table. The TV was still showing coverage of the verdict. "I have something to say," Malik announced. He looked nervous, but determined. "I've been thinking that maybe it's time to change my name." Maya and Daniel both looked at him in surprise. "Not to Whitmore," he clarified quickly, "but maybe Taylor Whitmore, if that's okay with both of you?" Maya reached for her son's hand. "Whatever you want, baby. You've earned the right to choose." Daniel couldn't speak. The gesture meant more than any legal victory. "There's something else," Malik continued. "I want to start a new company, one that develops fair AI systems from the ground up, and I could use some help. From both of you." Maya smiled. "A family business?" "A just business," Malik corrected. "But yes, a family one too." Daniel found his voice. "Son, I would be honored, but only if your mother agrees to be our chief legal officer." Maya laughed. "Someone has to keep you Whitmore man honest." They stayed late into the night, planning their new venture. Outside, the city lights twinkled. Inside, a broken family had finally found its way home. 6 months after the trial, Taylor Whitmore Technologies opened its doors in a renovated warehouse downtown. The company's mission statement, displayed proudly in the lobby, read, "Technology that serves all humanity, coded with conscience, powered by justice." Maya had transformed the top floor into a state-of-the-art legal department. Her team wasn't just there to handle paperwork. They were integrated into every step of development, making sure new programs were fair from the ground up. "We're doing something revolutionary here," she told a reporter from Tech Weekly. "We're putting ethics first, profit second, Malik's development team worked on the second floor. He'd hired the most diverse group of programmers in the industry, including many who had been rejected by biased AI systems at other companies. Daniel's office was next to Malik's, but he insisted on keeping the door open. "No more closed doors," he said. "No more secrets." Their first project was a hiring system that actually fought against bias. Companies across the country were already lining up to use it. "Look at this," Malik said one morning, showing his father some test results. "The system caught subtle bias we didn't even know was there. It's learning to be fairer than we are." Daniel smiled proudly. "You did it, son. You made it work." "We did it," Malik corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without your experience or Mom's insight." Their relationship was growing stronger every day. They still had awkward moments, times when the weight of the past felt heavy, but they were learning to talk through it. One evening, Maya found them arguing over code in the break room. "The neural network needs to be more aggressive," Malik insisted. "But if we push too hard, companies won't use it," Daniel countered. "Better to be right than popular," Malik said firmly. Maya laughed. "You sound just like your father when he was your age, before he lost his way." Both men turned to look at her, surprised by the comparison. "I remember when Daniel was the idealistic young programmer," Maya continued softly. "Before his family corrupted him with their ambitions." Daniel reached for her hand. "Maya, I know," she said. "You're finding your way back. We all are." They were interrupted by Daniel's assistant. Richard Whitmore had been sentenced 15 years for fraud and corruption. The news barely fazed them. They had more important things to focus on. The company was growing fast. Their ethical AI systems were becoming the industry standard. Other tech giants were being forced to change their practices to keep up. But success brought new challenges. One morning, Caroline showed up unannounced. "I want to invest," she announced, walking into Daniel's office like she still owned him. "This company is going to be huge. I want in." Before Daniel could respond, Malik stepped forward. "Sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. We're not interested in investments from people who only care about profit." Caroline's perfect face twisted with anger. "You can't shut me out. I was a Whitmore for 15 years. But you were never family," Maya said from the doorway. "And this is a family business." After Caroline stormed out, the three of them looked at each other and burst out laughing. "Well, that felt good," Malik admitted. "Almost as good as winning the trial," Maya agreed. Daniel watched them, his heart full. "I never thought I could have this," he said quietly. "A real family, a chance to make things right." "You almost missed it," Malik reminded him. "But you chose us in the end. That's what matters." Their success was drawing attention from unexpected places. Young programmers were turning down jobs at bigger companies to work for them. Civil rights organizations were asking them to review other AI systems for bias. One day, Maya received a call from her old law school. They wanted her to give the commencement speech. "Tell them yes," Daniel encouraged her. "The world needs to hear your story. Our story. Our story isn't finished yet," Maya pointed out. "No," Malik agreed. "We're just getting started." That night, they worked late again, sharing Chinese food and ideas. Maya was reviewing contracts. Daniel was debugging code. Malik was designing new test parameters. They looked like any other hard-working family business, but they were changing the world, one line of code at a time. 1 year after founding Taylor Whitmore Technologies, the company had become a beacon of hope in the tech industry. But success always brings enemies, and theirs were about to strike. The morning started normally. Maya was in her office preparing for a board meeting when her secretary rushed in. "Turn on the news now." Every channel was running the same story. Tech whistleblower claims Taylor Whitmore systems actually increase discrimination. Maya's phone started ringing immediately. It was Malik. "Mom, it's bad. Someone leaked internal test data, but they changed the numbers. They made it look like our systems are doing exactly what we fought against." Daniel burst into the office, his face pale. "I know who did this. It's Harrison Wells." "Who?" Maya asked. "My father's right-hand man at Whitmore Innovations, the one person who knew all our secrets. He disappeared right before the trial." Malik pulled up more news coverage on his laptop. Wells was everywhere, claiming he had proof that Taylor Whitmore Technologies was a fraud. "Their system doesn't fight discrimination," Wells told reporters. "It hides it better, and I can prove it." The stock price started falling. Clients were calling, threatening to pull out. Everything they'd built was at risk. "We need to fight back," Maya said, already thinking like a lawyer. "We have our real test data. We can prove he's lying." But it wasn't that simple. Wells had done something clever with the fake data, making it look like their system learned to hide bias instead of eliminate it. The technical details were convincing enough to fool most people. He used my old techniques against us, Daniel realized. The same ways we used to hide bias at Whitmore Innovations. He's making it look like I taught Malik to do the same thing. Malik slammed his hand on the desk. No one's going to believe we're just like them. We're different. Are we? A voice said from the doorway. It was Caroline. She walked in, perfect as always, but there was something different in her eyes. Worry, guilt. Harrison came to see me last month, she admitted. He wanted me to invest in his new company, said he was going to destroy you all and rebuild the Whitmore empire. And you're just telling us this now? Maya demanded. Caroline looked at Daniel. I almost went along with it, but I've been watching you this past year. All of you. You're actually trying to do good. Real good, not just for show. She pulled out her phone and played a recording. Harrison Wells, drunk at a charity gala, bragging about how he was going to ruin the Taylor Whitmore family. Why are you helping us? Malik asked suspiciously. Caroline smiled sadly. Because your father loved you enough to give up everything for you. I never thought he had that kind of love in him. Maybe I was wrong about a lot of things. The recording was exactly what they needed, but they had to act fast. Maya called an emergency press conference. This isn't just about clearing our name, she told Daniel and Malik as they prepared. This is about protecting everything we've built, everything we believe in. Standing before the cameras, the three of them presented a united front. Maya handled the legal side, explaining how Wells had manipulated the data. Daniel provided context about Wells's connection to the old Whitmore corruption. But it was Malik who saved the day. Live on national television, he ran their system through a series of tests, showing exactly how it worked to fight bias. He was brilliant, passionate, and absolutely convincing. My father taught me how these systems can hurt people, he told the reporters, but he also taught me how to fix them. We're not hiding bias, we're exposing it, fighting it. That's what this company stands for. The crisis wasn't over yet. Wells had disappeared again, taking his fake data with him, but public opinion was turning back in their favor. Late that night, after the cameras had gone and the phones had stopped ringing, the family sat in Maya's office, like they had so many times before. Thank you, Daniel said suddenly. For what? Maya asked. For believing in me, both of you. Even after everything I did wrong, you gave me a chance to do something right. Malik put his hand on his father's shoulder. You know what I realized today? When Wells attacked us, I wasn't worried about the company. I was worried about us, this family. Maya felt tears in her eyes. We've come a long way from that first deposition, haven't we? They had. The angry young man who wanted nothing to do with his father was now proud to work beside him. The woman who couldn't forgive had learned to trust again. And the man who chose power over love had finally found his way back to what mattered. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside, a family that had been broken by technology was using technology to heal others and themselves. 5 years had passed since Maya first filed the lawsuit that changed everything. Taylor Whitmore Technologies was now a global leader in ethical AI. But more importantly, its founders had become a real family. Maya stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel. Hundreds of people had gathered for the company's anniversary celebration. 5 years ago, she began, I thought I was fighting against a company, against a system. I never imagined I was really fighting for something much more precious, a second chance at family. In the audience, Malik sat between Daniel and his grandmother, Maya's mother. At 30, he had become one of the most respected voices in tech ethics. Time magazine had named him Person of the Year for his work in making artificial intelligence more humane. My son, Maya continued, her voice full of pride, taught me that it's not enough to fight against what's wrong. We have to build something better. And Daniel, she paused, smiling at the man who had broken her heart and helped heal it again. Daniel showed me that it's never too late to choose love over fear. The crowd applauded, but Maya wasn't finished. We have an announcement to make. Taylor Whitmore Technologies is creating a foundation. We're going to provide scholarships for underprivileged students who want to study computer science and ethics. And we're naming it after the person who inspired all of this, Richard Whitmore. A murmur went through the crowd. Daniel looked up in surprise. Maya explained, not to honor him, but to remind us that power without conscience destroys itself. Every student who receives this scholarship will learn about what happened, the whole story, our story. Later, at the party, Caroline approached their table. She had mellowed over the years, finding her own path after divorcing Daniel. "Congratulations," she said sincerely. "What you've built here, it's remarkable. Thank you for helping us that day," Malik said. "With the Wells recording. We never properly thanked you." Caroline smiled. "You know, I used to think family was about appearances, about maintaining the right image. You all taught me it's about something else entirely." Across the room, Harrison Wells's face appeared on a TV screen. He had finally been arrested in Singapore. The news barely registered. He was part of a past they had moved beyond. Daniel watched Maya working the room, elegant and powerful. She caught his eye and smiled. A real smile, full of warmth. They weren't married, probably never would be, but they had something deeper now. Trust, respect, and a shared purpose. "Dad," Malik said, pulling Daniel from his thoughts, "I've been thinking about the new neural network design. What if we—" Daniel listened to his son's ideas, marveling at how much of himself he could see in Malik, but also how much better, stronger, more principled Malik was. Maya had done that. She had raised him to be the man Daniel should have been. The party went late into the night. Stories were told, memories shared, plans made for the future. Maya's mother entertained everyone with tales of baby Malik, taking apart her kitchen appliances to see how they worked. Finally, as things were winding down, the three of them slipped away to Maya's old office. They had kept it exactly the same, even though the company now occupied a gleaming tower downtown. This was where their story had turned around, where they had become a family. "I have something to say," Maya announced, sitting in her old chair. "I've been offered a seat on the Supreme Court." "Mom, that's amazing!" Malik hugged her tight. Daniel beamed with pride. "They'd be lucky to have you." "I haven't decided yet," Maya said. "It would mean stepping back from the company, from what we've built here. Then we'll build something new," Malik said simply. "We're good at that now." Daniel took Maya's hand. "Whatever you decide, we're with you. That's what family means." Maya squeezed his hand, remembering a time when she thought she'd never forgive him. Now she couldn't imagine life without him, not as a romantic partner, but as her family, her friend, her partner in creating change. "Look what we did," she said softly, gesturing around them. "We turned our pain into purpose. We made something good out of something bad." "We're not done yet," Malik reminded them. "There's still so much work to do." "Together," Daniel said. "Together," Maya and Malik echoed. Outside, the sun was rising over the city, a new day, full of possibilities. Inside, a family that had been broken by pride and prejudice sat together, whole at last. They had faced betrayal, corruption, and their own demons. They had fallen apart and found their way back to each other. But most importantly, they had learned that true legacy isn't about power or money or even success. It's about the lives you touch, the wrongs you right, and the love you choose every day. Maya looked at her son, brilliant, compassionate, strong. She looked at Daniel, humbled, redeemed, finally worthy of being Malik's father. And she knew that sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you dreamed of. Sometimes it's better. "Ready to change the world again?" she asked her family. They were. They always would be. Together. The end.